Hello, hello. Welcome to the Joe Luca Real Estate Show. I am Joe, and I am your host every Tuesday evening, right here in WNRI 99.9 on the FM dial, 1380 on the AM dial, and of course streaming 24/7 at WNRI.com. No paywalls, nothing. Just go to WNRI.com and you can listen to this show anywhere around the world. And we rebroadcast the show on Saturdays at 1 o'clock. So if you don't catch it on Tuesday, you can always catch the rebroadcast Saturdays at 1. I want to start off thanking our sponsors, Compass, Title, and Escrow. Anthony Betancourt and his team do a great job helping buyers and sellers with everything from traditional closings and acquisitions, as well as 1031 exchanges. They have a great team that they work with on that, and Christine and Camille take care of our clients in an admirable manner. Very fortunate to work with Compass, Title, and Escrow. And of course, Vern Rainville. Vern Rainville is licensed by the state of Rhode Island to be a public insurance adjuster. Yes, that's a public insurance adjuster. That means he works for you, the homeowner, not the insurance company. So when you see the commercials on TV by these big insurance companies, and they talk about, we'll come out the day that you put your claim in and we'll cut you a check that day, tap the brakes. Tap the brakes, because that means that you're not getting all of the money. You may not be getting all the money that you're entitled to. And the best way to find out what you are entitled to is to give Vern Rainville a call at 484-300-8495. Again, that's 484-300-8495. Vern Rainville, Public Insurance Adjuster. Okay, so we've had a lot of news come out in the past week or so, and the impact on mortgage rates. Okay, 30-year fixed rate as of today at mortgagenewsdaily.com, 6.27. FHA 30-year, 5.88. VA 30-year, 5.9. So those two numbers are flat from yesterday, but the 30-year fixed is down 0.02%. Excuse me, from yesterday. So that's 0.02%. That's good news. The rates are slowly coming down. So hopefully this will, so much, as I've said this every week, so much of our economy has to do with, what we think, the mental aspect, the psychological aspect of it. And if people feel that the economy is strong and is good, it is. It will be, because they will do things to make that happen. It becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy, so to speak. The latest jobs report that came out today shows a cooling but still strong labor market. And excuse me, the Fed delivered their third 0.25% rate cut of the year, setting up a narrative of what is referred to by the talking heads as easing, not emergency. So now this, you can directly tie affordability and buyer seller timing, both nationally and right here in Rhode Island. So just a quick overview, macro story. Employers added about $64,000 jobs, not dollars, jobs in the month of November. And that pushed unemployment up to 4.6%, signaling a slower but still expanding job market and less wage pressure inflation. All right. Now, I want to point something out, because you might say, well, if it's stronger, why did the unemployment rate go up? One of the issues that's occurring right now is, the unemployment rate that only factors in people that are actively looking for work. There comes a time when some people I'm never going to be able to find work, and they stop looking. So they're not collecting, they're not looking, so they're on the sidelines, and they're not factored in to the unemployment rate at all. They're just kind of, an unaccounted for entity. What's been happening, what I've read in some of the publications, is that people who've been on the sidelines are now being coerced to start looking for work. So they are now being calculated, they're being accounted for in the unemployed. Okay, is one of those people that's looking for work. So I believe that is what is accounting for that uptick in the unemployment rate. Now, the Fed cut the Fed funds rate again by 25 basis points to 3.5%, to 3.75 for a target range. This is the third consecutive cut, and it's signaling a more cautious wait-and-see stance on further reductions. Well, some people were saying they should have reduced it 0.5%. But this is the Fed is cautious. I think if Trump had his druthers, if the president had his person in there, we would have seen something more significant than 0.25. And now the combination of these is we have growth. It's not falling off a cliff. Inflation pressures are easing, and the Fed is gently taking its foot off of the brake rather than slamming it on the gas. Now, I want to point out inflation pressures are easing. Gas is coming down. Some of those, items are coming down, but a lot of the working class people are not feeling it because the inflation for food items and some other needs that people are spending money on now, that has not relented yet. Okay, now bear in mind, we with the Biden administration, we experienced 22% inflation. Okay, so we have a ways to go before we can account for that, to make more of an equilibrium. One of the best things that's signaling that will be happening is because fuel prices are down. So I don't care what industry you're in, you have to have stuff delivered to your door in order for you to transact business. So if you have a convenience store, you're having your inventory delivered to the door. If you're a factory of making widgets, you're going to have materials to make those widgets delivered to your factory. If you have, and your factory is heated by oil, okay, you are going to have to pay for the oil truck to deliver the oil. So these all increase those costs. So when the cost of fuel for transportation goes down, that is a direct injection into strength into the economy. Okay, just think about these truckers who drive back and forth across the country delivering goods. Okay, if if diesel fuel prices are $1 cheaper today than they were a year and a half ago, that's a huge reduction. If you're putting 10, 20, 30,000 miles on at a clip, that's a big savings. So you're not going to have to charge as much for the delivery of those items. I grew up in the piano industry, and the pianos would get delivered. They'd come either directly from the factory or from a warehouse, and freight, that was a significant percentage of the cost of the piano. Okay, and if the fuel costs went up 10, 20, 30, 40, 50%, that would definitely increase the price, your cost of goods sold. So when those numbers start to come down, that makes it easier. Now, maybe you're not going to see reductions in prices, but the businesses can then reallocate those monies elsewhere in the business. So let's say, the widget factory, okay, so maybe they're not going to lower the price of widgets, but now they can buy new machinery and hire more people. Or maybe now they can put a new roof on the factory. So they're going to spend that money. They will allocate those resources. And that's especially true because we have the big beautiful bill coming into effect in 26. And that is going to allow businesses to depreciate, basically take advantage of tax benefits sooner rather than later. Okay, so that is going to be good because my example, the widget factory, they're going to be able to put the roof on. They'll hire electricians. They'll hire plumbers. They'll hire other types of contractors to make improvements to the building. These businesses will also save money because of the reduced regulations. Okay, Regulations are a direct cost that businesses have to account for by taking more time to bring items to production, more man hours, person hours, labor time, and that all adds to the cost of the goods sold. So those are things that we are not going to be experiencing those excessive costs. So the excess profit will go back into the economy by way of having improvements done to the structures, or reinvesting, hiring more people, etc. Okay, because one thing people forget about is, when you have a worker, if you're paying that worker $15 or $20 an hour, that's what the worker is receiving, but it costs the employer more than that. Okay, depending on the situation, anywhere from 15 to 35% more than that. Okay, so the cost is higher. So if companies have relaxed regulations, their tax burden is reduced, maybe they'll be able to hire more people. Okay. Now, getting back to Fed rate cuts, when the Fed does that, they typically put a little downward pressure on mortgage rates over time, over the longer time. So you're not going to see a direct reduction in mortgage interest rates, but over time, it will put downward pressure for a number of factors. I don't want to get too technical, but what this will do is this can really revive housing demand at the margins, and it may be moderate, uneven across different markets depending on the type of housing, where you are geographically, etc. But it can definitely help the broader economy, and in pockets, local economies as well. Okay, so that's more of a long-term benefit from the downward pressure that reduced Fed funds rates have on mortgage rates. Now, the link between Fed funds and mortgage rates, as I said, Fed funds are typically short-term, okay, car loans, credit cards, things like that. And the overnight rate that the Fed charges banks. 30-year mortgage rates track longer-term bond yields, like the 10-year Treasury bond. Okay, that's not affected by the Fed funds rate directly. Okay, in this cycle, as we said earlier, they've already reduced it. And shorter-term yields are drifting lower, while 10-year yields in the Treasury bonds and mortgage rates have moved only modestly compared to the short-term rates. So they've been affected, but not directly and not significantly. So what happens historically is mortgage rates will continue to decline. That's why one of the reasons everyone is anticipating 2026 to be a great year for real estate, for buyers and sellers, and of course mortgage lenders. Okay, because across the board, since COVID, home sales are down about 40%. Okay, so that means everybody who's in the business that depends on sales of property, their income has been down 37 to 40%. Okay, so mortgage rates are generally going to expected to continue to trend down over 2026, and eventually fall a little bit below 6%, as long as the bond yield, the 10-year bond yields, keep easing. We're just slightly above it, as I said earlier, 6.25, but the FHA and VA loan, government-backed loans, those are below 6%. So, what do you think this is going to mean for housing demand? Changes in mortgage rates do impact the willingness to pay, while factors like income and down payment constraints and overall wealth can matter even more, especially for cash credit-constrained buyers. But I want to point out, folks, as we mentioned last week, the real wages have been increasing, okay, increasing at a rate greater than the inflation rate. Okay, so we're in the somewhere between 2 and 3%, depending on what numbers you're looking at for the inflation rate, and you have real wages increasing between 4 and 5%, at the end of the year, that makes a big difference. Okay, um, so if rate cuts are happening because the economy is weakening, job losses, shaky consumer confidence can offset the benefit of slightly cheaper mortgages, and that may keep some buyers on the sidelines. Again, remember we said earlier, it's very psychological. So some people may still be saying, hey, you know what, we really need to buy a bigger house now that we have an extra child or two. But there are some folks who might be saying, you know what, we really don't need to buy something, so let's wait and see, what's going to happen. When you have a situation where you have high price, low inventory markets, small mortgage rate declines really may not affect affordability that much. Okay, so demand is still capped by income and supply rather than financing, and that's why even if we started building houses today as fast as possible, it's going to take several years for us to get out of this inventory shortage. All right. This is something that didn't happen overnight. It's happened over 10 or 15 years, so we're going to have to dig ourselves out of this. I think what will happen is we are going to earn ourselves. Income is going to grow out of this. So the housing affordability will be less challenging, but we're still going to have a housing shortage. So what that means for home owners is we're not going to see prices getting pushed down, because demand is going to make sure that doesn't happen. Okay, what we really should be doing is we need to pay attention and look for opportunities on the development side. Okay, I think municipalities like Woonsocket, like Cumberland, like North Providence, all the municipalities in this state, ditto in Massachusetts, need to be resourceful and think outside the box for ways to increase housing supply on the rental side and on the ownership side. Okay, so you might say, well, Joe, we don't have enough land to put in a new housing development. Well, maybe you can do condominium conversion. We have a lot of buildings. We have, office vacancies that are much higher than they've been. Convert those buildings, okay, to condominiums. Is it easy? No. Is it simple? No. Is it cheap? No. But the demand is there, and if they're redone, nicely developed, nicely designed, and priced appropriately, they will sell. Okay, and that's a good thing. Home ownership is a good thing. Condo ownership is a good thing. Okay, and one of the a potential benefit for these selling at higher prices right now is it's less likely that these single-family houses and condos will be purchased by investors to rent them out, because the numbers may not work. Okay, you can't, unless you're paying cash, it doesn't make sense to buy a property, have a mortgage, and then rent it out, because the numbers don't work when you factor in all the expenses and the principal and interest payment on the mortgage, taxes, insurances, etc., maintenance. If it's a condo, the condo fee. There's not enough, as they say, not enough meat on the bone for it to be a viable investment option. Okay, so I think if we do something like that, we will increase the ownership of, the purchases of homes by owner occupants. That was a thought I was trying to get out. Which, if we can do that, that would be great, because while we need to have rental inventory, we also need inventory for owners. And I think we can have, some of those rental units increased by converting mills or things like that. And that will be good, because, workforce housing. This is something I'm very, passionate about, and I'm very chagrined that we do not have enough of it in this state. We haven't for a long time. We need housing. We need apartments that people can afford to rent. Okay, when you have someone that they're making $1,500, $1,600, $1,700 a month, $2,000 a month from Social Security, and the rent for a one-bedroom apartment is $1,500, the math doesn't work. The math doesn't work. So we need to figure out a way so that developers can develop apartments and rent them out at rates that can be afforded by, that can be paid by, workforce, in the population and the workforce that's working class people. That's what I'm trying to say. I'm at a loss for words tonight. Working class people. It's very challenging. It's very challenging. Again, as wages start to increase, this will, improve the situation. But it would be nicer if we could have more inventory too. Okay. Now, nationally, just talking about some of the real estate, just some points I wanted to just cover. A 4.6% unemployment rate is not the best, but I think it may be okay for what where we're going. We're not looking to have a drastic, quick turnaround in, we don't want to have rates drop. And anything really drastic when it comes to the economy is not good on the upside or the downside. So it's better if we have things a little bit more gradual, okay? Now, higher unemployment and headlines, as I mentioned earlier, headlines about a weakening job market may make these buyers stay on the sideline, but I think that there are more than enough of these people who can buy homes that will support, a continued thriving housing economy. All right. Now, history and research does, excuse me, I already said that. So builders already report muted buyer demand due to affordability concerns. Okay. So builders are looking at this, and again, if you look at days on market for new construction, it's not selling as quickly as, of course, as quickly as builders would like, or the listing agents. But one of the reasons for that is because new construction is not inexpensive. All right, it's I'd say it's almost impossible today to build a single-family home built for a price that's below the median price of a home in Rhode Island. Okay. Because you need to have, it has to be a certain size, it has to be in a good area. You don't want to buy property with a low land acquisition cost because it's probably not a good neighborhood. And by that I mean not a neighborhood that will not have a lot of demand. Okay. Here in Rhode Island, we're very fortunate in that this is a strong seller's market. It's driven by very low inventory. We have under 2,500 active listings statewide. This is multifamily and single family versus an average of 5 to 6 months of supply, which would be a multiple of that. The average Rhode Island home prices are elevated in the mid 500 range earlier this year, and has continued to post year-over-year gains with a high share of homes selling at or above list price. Now, I just want to qualify that. A lot of houses are selling at or above list price. Sometimes they're only selling above list price to cover closing costs. Okay. So I just want to put that in there. So it's, someone, they're buying the house and they just want to get, the buyer's agent compensation included in closing costs, or closing costs for their FHA loan or their VA loan, things like that. But, the fact that we have had the median price of single-family homes in Rhode Island over 500,000 is, I still can't believe it, and we've had this for over 6 months. Realtor.com has noted that, and we talked about this last week, folks, not one of our 39 municipalities are considered truly, air quotes, affordable for typical incomes, which demonstrates a structural affordability problem that lower rates alone cannot fix. Now, Lower rates will help, but that's just, the interest portion of your payment. Then you still have the principal portion of your payment that has to be covered. And then, of course, you also have property taxes. And in some communities like Cumberland, you also have a fire tax. And then you have insurances. And insurance, it has, I don't know if it's probably up about 60% since before COVID, homeowners insurance. So that's a big number. Car insurance is insane, how much it's gone up. Now, of course, this has gone up for, insurance companies will point out for legitimate reasons. But these are things that you have to be able to shoulder these costs in order to own a home. So you have to pay the homeowner's insurance. You have to pay, the maintenance. Okay, you have to pay, the principal and interest. You have to pay your property taxes, your fire taxes. So those are the things that sometimes make it unaffordable. Also, folks, if you're listening, a lot of people over the past few years have been having solar panels installed on their homes. Before you do that, talk to a realtor. If you have questions, I've done a lot of research on this over the past year. You can give me a call, your humble host, Joe Luca, 401-409-5030. You can also text me, 401-409-5030. And I will get back to you within 24 hours and answer any questions you have. A problem or a challenge or an issue with solar panels is, I put solar panels on my house. They cost, X tens of thousands of dollars. I put so much money down, and then I either lease them or I finance them. So I have a monthly payment that has to be made for the cost of those solar panels and to put them on my roof. Let's say that's $150 a month. Okay, now I may, depending on how much sun we get, I may not have an electric bill, but I still have to pay that $150 a month. When I sell my house, if I don't pay off those solar panels, the buyer has to qualify to pay those off. So that means the buyer has to qualify to buy my house, getting the mortgage, including property taxes, and they also have to be able to pay an additional, in my example, $150 a month for the solar panels, and then hope that that doesn't push their DTI, debt to income ratio, out of range, so that the banks would say, oh no, now your debt is too high, we can't give you the mortgage. That is a challenge, and many times if you have a home and you're selling it, and it's typically a home for first-time home buyers, you may have some challenges. You may have to wait to find someone that can qualify what what has to be paid on the mortgage and the solar panels. So before you put solar panels on your house, and the other thing, folks, you have to remember is they talk about a tax credit. Oh, if you buy them, you can get a tax credit. The tax credit is only good if you pay a lot in taxes, okay? If I only have to pay $1,500 a year in property taxes, I'm not going to get a $7,000 tax deduction, okay? Now, if I have to pay $30,000 or $40,000 a year in taxes, and I can get a $7,000 tax deduction or whatever it is, that makes sense. So instead of paying $30,000, I'd pay $23,000. Then it would work. But if you don't pay any federal taxes, or you pay very little, you are not going to benefit from the tax deduction, okay? The tax, because that's just the way it is. And a lot of people are unaware of that. They think they're going to get a check from the government for $4,000, $5,000, $6,000, $7,000 after they put solar panels on. The reason for that is because no one reads those contracts. No one reads the contract because most people don't read anything that they sign. I've had clients sign listing agreements, sign buyer agreement. They have no idea what they're signing. Even though I tell them, please read it over. Let me know if you have any questions. If you don't read it and don't ask questions, I can't be held liable for something you didn't understand because you didn't tell me. And if it's really hard, we'll connect you with an attorney who can read it to you and explain it to you, because I do not provide legal advice. Okay? So, right now for buyers, the job market is softer, as I said, but not broken. The Fed is trimming rates in Rhode Island. We're very fortunate that inventory has remained tight. Okay, so that can be tough for buyers, but for sellers, even with a cooler national economies, our inventory crunch is still working in favor of sellers. All right, modest rate reductions could bring more qualified buyers in 2026 rather than lessen demand. Okay, because again, okay, with rates at, let's say, 6.75%, you have a pool of buyers who can qualify to buy a $500,000 home. But if those rates go down to 6.27 or 5.9 for a VA loan, they can afford to either buy a more expensive house, or now there are more people who can afford that $500,000 house. Okay? Because I couldn't afford the house before when it was 6.5%, but at 5.9%, that's going to lower my payment just enough. So now my debt to income ratios fall within the guidelines of FHA, VA, conventional, whatever, the loan program is. That's significant. Okay? Because again, it doesn't sound like a lot, but even if you just get an extra 2 or 3% of buyers who can now qualify for that home, that's a lot more demand. It's a lot more demand. Okay? So things are continuing to look good for sellers. Now, for investors and move-up buyers, this is, it's shifting from a rate shock market to a normalizing market, which is great for those who are willing to trade in a slightly softer price environment for better financing and more negotiable terms. Okay, investors look at things a little bit differently. Of course, the interest rates that an investor pays for a house is going to be higher than the interest rate an owner-occupant will be paying for that same house. Okay, so the investor, they have to see either they have to put a bigger down payment down to bring down their monthly payment, or they have to look at other ways to increase revenue from the property to offset those rates. Okay, maybe they have extra storage in the basement. They can charge an extra, 25 or 50 bucks a month per tenant for storage. Oh, they've got garages, or they're parking, if you live in an urban area, and now you can charge for people to park cars on your property. Okay, these are ways for landlords to get extra revenue. There are some other more creative ways as well. So there are things that landlords can do, to help defray or offset the increased numbers that they have to shoulder because they're an investor. All right. Typically, landlords or investors like to get a 22% return on their money or more. Now, you might say, wow, that's a big number. I'm only getting 2% in the bank. Well, when you're an investor, you can benefit from the beauty of leverage. Okay? And again, so let me explain it this way. If I'm buying a $500,000 house, and if it's an investment, I will probably have to put 20% down. So that's $100,000 I'm putting down on a $500,000 house. Let's say I rent it out, and let's say my rental income is $36,000 a year. Okay, and let's say I'm paying $2,500 a month for principal, interest, taxes, and insurance. So $2,500 a month, that would be what, 30,000 bucks a year. So I'm making 6,000 bucks net profit every year. So I put $100,000 down, but these numbers actually aren't that good, and I'm making 6%. So that would not be a good return for an investor. However, let's say they were renting out 3 units and they were making $2,500 per unit. Okay, so now that's $90,000 a year. Subtract everything out for your expenses. Okay, now you're looking at much more than a 22% return on your investment. Okay, I mean, if you were spending $4,000 a month on all your expenses, that's 48,000 bucks a year. You're making 90, so that's $52,000 return on a $100,000 investment. So that is a very good return on your money. That's the way investors look at property. So a reduction in rates could definitely help investors, help properties become more attractive for investors. Now you might say, well, we don't want investors, we want homeowners. I thought that's what you said, Joe. Yes, we do, but sometimes when you have blighted properties, when you have properties that have been neglected for a long period of time and they have deferred maintenance issues, an investor can go in, make the repairs necessary, improve the property so it is now fully updated. Okay, that's something that one of the advertisers on the station that they do. Um, they go in and they'll buy grandma's house from you for cash, close in 10 days. Because they're paying cash, you are going to get a rate much below fair market value, but they'll buy it as is. You get the cash, no fuss, no muss, walk away. Now, if you inherited the house and you don't have the money to make improvements yourself or to pay the taxes yourself, that's a good deal. Okay, that makes sense. Not everyone who's selling a house is in that situation. Typically if you have someone who's selling a house and they have a mortgage against the house that they have to pay off, unless that mortgage has a really low balance, they may not be a good candidate for one of these, I Buy Ugly Houses or Moss Homes or one of these other companies, because they need to buy that house for really short money for it to make sense for them. Because again, why does a company exist? Economics lesson. Companies exist for one reason and one reason only, and that is to make a profit. To make a profit. So, when you hear that Exxon Mobil, made so many billions of dollars in profit, you can't hold that against them because it took a lot of investment in order for them to be able to make that profit. And they also have to cover the expenses when there's no profit. And they have to continuously invest in resources so that they remain profitable. Okay? Otherwise, they'll be just one of these companies that goes by the wayside and is, not being run well, and then it has to be closed or bought out by another company. But companies exist for one reason, and that's to make a profit. So when you hear that companies are making profits, you should not feel anything but joy for them, because if they're making a profit, that means they have employees and they can pay salaries. They can spend money and inject it into the economy. Okay? If it's a publicly traded company and they're making a profit, and many times those profits are paid out to shareholders and those shareholders could be pension systems, could be in your IRA or in your 401k, those stocks. So you would benefit from that as a working class individual. It's not just the wealthy who benefit from this. Okay? Where I have a problem with some of the big Wall Street bankers and corporations is because they're so big, they're just such large global companies, they can do things in their pursuit of profit. They can do things that are beneficial to the company that may be not good for the country. Okay, one of the things recently we've been reading in the headlines is how NVIDIA has been prohibited from selling their top-notch chips to China. And the reason for that is because that, their best chips, it's an American company, they're made here. We want the best stuff for our military, for our infrastructure, for our manufacturers. We don't want it going to our enemies. Okay? We'll sell them today's best chips tomorrow when there's a new top chip out. So, that way it works out well for the country and works out well for the company. But, so my concern, as I was saying, is, like JP Morgan, what their objectives are in China may be at cross purposes for what we as a country, as a nation, as a population want to happen in China. Okay, so I think it's great. Capitalism is great. Companies making a profit is great, but they need to have some loyalty to this country, okay, and contribute to our economic stability and our strength, because we don't want to give anything away to our enemies, because China definitely would do everything they could to hasten our demise. And if you have any doubt about that, just look around at what, a few years ago they had that balloon that was tracking all of so much going across our countries. They're buying up land, farmland next to or adjacent to military bases, and buying up farmland just to have it. If they control our bread basket in this country, they could literally poison us. They could shut down that acreage so it doesn't generate food. Okay, so we need to be careful on many fronts when it comes to China. And profitability of our companies is something that hopefully, this administration will convince these people, these companies, that, yeah, we want you to be profitable, but we don't want you to give away the farm. Okay, literally and figuratively. Folks, you're listening to the Joe Luca Real Estate Show right here in WNRI 99.9 FM 1380 on the AM dial, and streaming at WNRI.com. WNRI.com. If you have any questions, you want to talk to me, 401-409-5030. You can text or call me at that number. Again, Joe Luca Realtor, 401-409-5030. Best way to reach me. Even if you're not sure, you would just say, hey, I wonder how much my house is worth. I wonder if it would make sense for me to spend this money on the exterior, the interior, whatever it is on my house. Who should I call? I can help you out. Okay. 401-409-5030. 401-409-5030. Just shoot me a text or give me a call at that number. It's about 10 minutes before the hour. I want to thank Compass Title and Escrow, Anthony Betancourt, and his team do a fantastic job taking care of buyers and sellers of residential and commercial real estate. And of course, Vern Rainville. Vern is a public insurance adjuster. That means he works for you, the homeowner, not the insurance company. N-O-T, not the insurance company. He's looking out for your best interest. He has a background in construction, so he knows his way around buildings, around homes. And all you have to do is give him a call. He'll get back to you within 24 hours. 484-300-8495. Again, 484-300-8495. That's Vern Rainville, Public Insurance Adjuster. Public Insurance Adjuster. Okay. So I want to take the last few minutes actually to talk about something that I mentioned this before, I think a week or two ago, and John had someone calling in, and we're talking about the homeless people here in Woonsocket. And this is something that, I really, as a Christian, it pains me to see that that we have human beings, our brothers and sisters, um, living outside in this crazy weather that we've had, really cold weather. I woke up the other morning and it was like 7 degrees at my house. Um, I can't imagine sleeping outside in that. And I'm not in favor of the government, municipal, state, or federal, basically just giving these people free housing. I'm not in favor of that at all. I realize that some of these people have issues that need to be dealt with, and if they don't want to deal with them, that should be their problem. But I also realize there are a lot of people, and I don't know what the percentage is, but a lot of people out there who, they're just working class and homeless. They can't get enough money together to put a roof over their head. You know, um, my daughter worked with a young woman who um, was homeless with her family, and young woman, was a student, and it breaks my heart, for something like that to happen. So, what am I saying? I kind of have this idea, and I don't know if it's feasible or not. I think it would be great if we could get people together from the private sector, from if it's politicians or administrators and on the private sector side, real estate people, um, financing people, people in banking, and see if there's a way to figure something out. Not and we want people who have constructive ideas, um, and are solution oriented and not complaint oriented. Okay, because I think this is a problem. Complaining that is not going to get us anywhere. Okay, these people are human beings. We have to treat them like human beings. They're not all of them are um, you know um, what's the saying, paragons of morality, but not all of them are up to nefarious intent. Not all of them are drug addicts. We may have a good portion of them who are veterans, who, again, families with children, with pets. I think that we as a society in this city, in this state, in this country, should try to do something, even on a small level, to create a better path forward for these people, because they are our Christian brothers and sisters, and Jesus tells us to love them. So what can we do? Now, we may get, if we get a bunch of people, we may have some meetings and not be able to get anything done, but at least we should try. So here's what I'm proposing. Last couple of minutes of my show. If anyone has ideas or has a desire, or you think I'm crazy, give me a call or send me a text. My number, again, it's 401-409-5030. 401-409-5030. Joe, Luca, Luca. I'd love to put something together, maybe like, with someone like a John Ward. I'm sure John is too busy. But someone like that, get some folks in the private sector, maybe get a couple of mayors or their staff to, maybe from some communities up here in northern Rhode Island, and just try to put some ideas together, strategize. What could be done? Maybe I'm naive. Maybe, it's a pipe dream. But I think that this is something that, it's been kind of eating at me for quite a while. And, I feel terrible when I take a call from someone at my office and they say, "Hi, Joe, this is so-and-so. I need to get a 2-bedroom apartment for me and my significant other or my child or my mother. And, okay, what's your total income per month? $1,900. Can't get a 2-bedroom apartment that is cheap enough so that you could afford it on $1,900 a month. Okay, um, and it breaks my heart to have to tell someone that, because I don't have any suggestion. I don't have any solution. I can't point them anywhere. And it's even worse when it's someone who's calling up and, oh, the house was sold that they've lived in for the past 20 years, and they're paying $1,000 a month rent for a two-bedroom apartment. You're not going to find that. Not going to find that today. So I don't have a solution. It's just there's a problem out there that I think we, as a society, we should at least try to address this, and not address it by just having someone else take care of it, have the state, the city, the federal government take care of it. No, they don't. The government is not efficient at spending money. Look at all of the money that's wasted by the federal government. They send blocks of money to states. They don't have any control over what the states do, so the money could be wasted, and we're starting to find out about this now because of Doge and some other things that the Trump administration is doing. Secretary of Labor DeRemer, I love her. She, had a post today on, was it Instagram or Twitter, just talking about all of this fraud that's happening in states with labor monies. That's taxpayer money. It should be spent more efficiently, more appropriately. And so I think, getting back to the situation with homeless people, I don't think it would be wise to rely upon the government to solve this problem, because the government is not set up to do it. The government can do something, spend a lot of money. There's no direct consequence whether it's successful or a complete and utter failure. If any given state, any given city spent $20 million to help the homeless, if it's a resounding success, no one is rewarded. If it's a complete and utter failure, no one loses their job, because it's just a big black hole where the money goes. Okay. Folks, you've been listening to the Joe Luca Real Estate Show right here on WNRI 99.9 FM, 1380 AM, WNRI.com. Thank you very much for tuning in and bearing with me the last few minutes of the show, but I would really appreciate it if anyone has any thoughts. 401-409-5030. Shoot me a text or give me a call. Other than that, we will be back next week, Christmas week. Next up is Rick Mernier, and I look forward to being back. Same bat time, same bat channel. Take care, everybody. Bye-bye.